want to bring Anita back in the conversation.
Well, talk about a fire hose of information here to respond to. Some of these I would like to have Daryl respond to because he has much more expertise in this area than I. But one thing I think is important to say here, and that is this notion of trusting the experts. That would make life a whole lot easier if we could trust the experts. But in this day and age, I think citizens and voters have recognized that it's important for us to be informed and for us to verify the kind of information that we're hearing from our government agencies, our elected leaders. And in this case, if you listen closely to some of the things that were said, and I know Daryl will be responding to some of them, this notion that trapping, for example, if it's good enough for the biologists, it should be good enough for the recreational hunters. Of course trapping is the most efficient way to get a bear. Of course it is. You lure a bear completely unexpected to a site where its leg gets caught in a leg hold trap from which it cannot escape and for which it is there for hours, possibly a day, hopefully not more days, injuring itself, terrified, trying to get itself free, you know, possibly mutilating itself in the process, only then to be shot at point-blank range. Of course, that's a very effective way to catch a bear. However, it is also unbelievably cruel and unfair. And so, no, those shouldn't be used all the time, even though trapping may be used by the wildlife professionals when they're needed. Any suggestion that these aren't cruel snares should have been dispelled by an incident that took place in Maine and was widely reported in October, where a 90-year-old hunter in the woods with his dog stepped into a bear trap, into a snare. And the dog was so distressed that when he tried to release the dog and couldn't, the dog bit him, and ultimately this hunter shot his own dog.
Just to clarify,
so,
that was actually a coyote, a trap, not the same kind of trap we use with bears. It was
reported as a bear trap. So let's at least be clear.
It is not a bear trap.
Okay.
That was trapped in southern Maine.
I'd like to remind everybody here in the studio, please. I'm going to ask everyone to please keep questions shorter and responses much shorter. I want to get to as many people as possible. So if you would work with me on that, I certainly would appreciate it. I want to get to as many questions as possible. Let me get a quick couple of comments from Daryl, then I want to move on. I have some folks lined up for questions, but please.
We've heard comparisons of bear populations with Massachusetts and New Jersey, both higher population densities. I do want to address Colorado because the Colorado bear biologist said the real problem is that people in Aspen, they have a lot of money and they are just punching out into the wilderness. It's as if comparing Maine to Colorado it would be saying that we are going to be putting in wealthy, large housing populations in a rustic county, and that's not even close to what's happening. In Oregon, the coast of Oregon is extremely thick woods, and the biologists there said it's as thick as anywhere. And their hunters learned to hunt fair chase there within a couple of years. Washington State, even in the thicker woods, they're still hunting fair chase there. They are not having a significant increase in bear problems. And their populations are very similar to Maine's as far as the population density goes. So our information from their biologists seems to be different from their information from their biologists. But I do want to address why we should not trust our wildlife biologists, or why we should think twice before just taking the words of our wildlife biologists. There's something that's required of scientists, and that's being objective. Being able to look at both sides, taking a very balanced look at it, and being able to hypothesize or come to a conclusion based on all the available evidence. Now, if your chief bear biologist is also an avid bear hunter and guide and works for an organization or an outfitter where he's prominently displayed with a bear here and with 100% guarantee bear trapping, 100% guarantee bear hounding, and the guy next to him, in the picture next to him, is another member of our bear study group who is also a guide and runs Maine Trophy Outfitters. There's a lack of objectivity there. And one more.
We're going to have to leave it there, and
Okay.
I think the point is
All
made.
right.
And again, I really need shorter answers.
Sure.
I have people lined up, and I'm not going to have enough time to get to all of our public. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you work, and your question.
I'm John Holyoke. I'm the outdoors editor at the Bangor Daily News. My question, I guess, would be a much shorter. I think this is a kind of an illustration of the two mains thing we always hear about. Back 10 years ago, this issue was dealt with. Northern Maine defeated at 60% to 40%. Southern Maine supported at 53-47. What's different now, and why are we back here again?
Actually, let me follow up with Daryl, because I cut you off a moment, but I want you to get a quick response in on the difference between 2004 and 2014, and then I have to bring James back in the conversation. And please, let's keep our answers a little shorter, okay?
Very easy. In 2004, we held a referendum to allow people to make a choice. Typically, when there is a referendum, when you finally have to go to a referendum to allow society to make changes, the first one doesn't always pass. And if you look at gay marriage or medical marijuana, those things didn't pass the first time either. Typically, the second time, you have more data, which we do. You have more opportunity to present the whole picture as opposed to what might have been just presented the first time hurriedly. And we find a lot of times these first referendums are based on fear. People who don't like change promote fear among the general populace. And that is what we're seeing here as well. The only thing is we have 10 more years of data and more information and more studies that have been done since that time. And we know better this time. We can better provide the public with good information.
I want to follow up with James, and then I have to check with our social media desk after that, because viewers at home, I think, are just as fired up as the viewers, as our audience members are here. But James, follow up.
Sure. I've got to say this is one of the best questions of the night so far, I think. What's different about this campaign than the one 10 years ago is the fact that I think a lot of people felt 10 years ago that this was a North versus South debate, the rural versus urban debate. This time around, our coalition is extremely proud to be able to have all three candidates for governor, Elliott Cutler, Mike Michoud, and Paul LePage, all on board. We've got the Maine Tourism Association, the Maine AFL-CIO, the Maine Forest Products Council, Guides and Outfitters, the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, and the list goes on and on and on. I can say that I'm very proud at this point to be able to represent what I think is probably the most politically diverse North and South coalition of people that have ever banded together to protect our nationally recognized bear management programs and support the people at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And it's an extremely different dynamic. And I would just tack on that the other difference this time around is that on the proponent's side, the campaign is being funded almost entirely by one special interest group in Washington, D.C. If this was any other campaign, governor, legislature, the U.S. Senate, whatever it might be, and there was one person or one organization funding the campaign, I think people would be asking a lot of questions. And I think it's extremely fair of the public to be able to ask questions of the proponents in this case, who are taking over 99% of their funding from one organization based in Washington, D.C.
If you think there's a lot of emotion here in this room, I'm being told by the producer that our social media is blowing up with people at home who want to join the debate. So let's check with our social media desk. Jana, what's the latest?
Mark, I can't keep up. There are so many tweets coming in with the Your Voice, Your Future hashtag. You know, Daryl joked with me before this debate began. He said, hey, don't believe what they're going to tweet about me. And we've gotten a couple about Daryl, I have to say. I won't read them on TV. But I do want to get to one tweet from Ethan J. Tremblay, who asks, why does Maine, the state with the best management program, like Judy was talking about, keep using these management practices when other states don't? A good point there. Let's get to a Facebook comment from Nora Bryant. She says, ban it all. Bears are creatures too. Humans do more damage anyway, so let's trap them. Well, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, but I wanted to pose a question to our panel. And I think that this has a couple different implications. Lowell Cooley asked on Facebook, what's the average cost for dealing with a nuisance bear? And if we're having more nuisance bears, will those costs go up if there are more bears because of less baiting, trapping, and hunting? Mark.
Great question. Judy, do you have Any estimates here on the cost?
I'm going to address that after, but first I'm going to take extraordinary exception to Daryl's comments. Randy Cross is the best bear biologist in North America. He has handled more black bears than anybody in this world, dead or alive. Randy cares more about black bears and the health of Maine's bear population than anybody in this state. There is absolutely no question. Randy thinks about bears morning, noon, and night for his entire life. Randy is going to be here no matter what happens with the referendum. He's going to be here working to protect Maine's bears. And I want to clarify, Randy is a whitewater guide. 15 years ago, he guided for bears, never made a profit. He did it about 3 years, and this keeps coming up. It is ridiculous. So I'm not going to stand here, and you can attack me all you want, Daryl, but I will not have you attack our bear biologists.
And the viewer's question, what's the cost?
The other point of that, the third point is people need to understand black bear populations are expanding throughout the entire country. Every jurisdiction in the Northeast is looking to expand hunting seasons, and they are looking to expand methods. The state of New York never allowed baiting. They are now in the process of trying to allow baiting. States all across the Northeast where we have black bears are expanding the opportunities for people to try and control the bear population. So the question about how much does it cost, actually I have no idea. I don't know. The department, I can't tell you what it costs, how much.
And James, you have some insight?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a couple of costs that we need to think about. One is the fact that if this question were to pass, it would be a $5 million approximately, plus or minus, impact to the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So that impact, the cost burden of dealing with bears, isn't going to be the departments anymore. That's going to be shifted to the municipalities, and it's going to be shifted to individuals to pay for their own nuisance control. I think the other thing that's really important with this is that what we've seen from the other side is no strategy, no idea on how they would possibly recruit the number of hunters that would be needed in order to control the bear population. I think that's really important. The department projects that we would need 150,000 new bear hunters in the state in order to control Maine's bear population. The proponents have offered no strategy on how we do that, and the fact of the matter is there are no other tools that will allow us to control Maine's bear population this way.
All right, and I don't want to create a ping-pong game here, but I do want to give Daryl a few moments to respond to Judy's comments, and then we'll bring Anita back in the conversation, and then I want to follow up with more questions. So, Daryl, if you have a few moments, please.
Only to respond to Judy, I'm just going to say if you go on Randy's website, it says bear hunting. It advertises bear hunting. So I have to take exception that he's not bear hunting because it's advertised. If you don't do it, you don't do it, but it's advertised. The second thing is that the majority of bear nuisance complaints are, I saw a bear in my backyard. So let's be realistic about what actual bear nuisance complaints are. And as for James' concern, if we stop feeding bears millions and millions of pounds of high-fat, high-calorie food at a time of year when they are most reliant on building fat in their bodies for reproduction, we will slow the population growth and therefore need less hunters. To illustrate that, I'm just going to go really quickly, one short paragraph from IFNW's, this is their website page on black bears. And I'm going to build on this as we go along, but it says, although black bears breed in the summer, fetal development is delayed until early winter, after the female has entered a den. In January and February, female bears give birth to 1 to 4 cubs inside the winter den. If a female is unable to store sufficient body fat prior to entering the den, the pregnancy is terminated. What we have been doing is supplementally feeding bears. I actually believe we've reached a tipping point about 2005 because there is a study on beech production and bears by a Maine biologist, Wally Jacobus, that says suddenly, actually let me quote from it, it says, sorry, it talks about suddenly we are seeing in 2005 bears having cubs every year instead of in alternate years of good beech resources. And I believe what's happened is we've actually reached a tipping point after that last referendum. Baiting became more popular, and we finally reached that point where we were putting out enough food to supplement bears' feeding.